Greetings everyone, I am Dr. J. I was planning on having a different video for this week, but that one is gonna have to wait due to the amount of editing required for it, and because my throat decided that today was the day the revolution begins. Because who doesn't love springtime allergies, apparently. So, yeah, I don't want that carrying over into the video I have in mind, so that will have to wait until after next week's review. In the meantime, here's some progress I've made into a couple of games that aren't being reviewed next week, starting with Heroes of Might and Magic 3. After I made the last video, I came to a realization about how I was approaching it. To start with, I had once again made the same mistake that my younger self did, in assuming that the campaign listed at the top of the menu was the first one, when it's actually an expansion campaign. It should have been a dead giveaway when it had seemingly nothing to do with the first cutscene, but that meant I had thrown myself into a much more difficult circumstance right off the bat. Unfortunately, for the purpose of critique, it's gonna throw off my assessment of the difficulty curve, as before I figured that out, I had beaten 2 missions in that expansion and then powered through about a third of the main game without a second thought. I'm almost certain the difficulty is gonna come back in force and there's a time mission that I'm stuck on due to circumstances surrounding it, but that's gonna make it an interesting game to critique unto itself. On top of that, I've only now realized just how daunting this game actually is. To get a sense for how long a given game is gonna be, I've been relying on howlongtobeat.com, which is usually fairly accurate. Again, I had been looking at only one part of it while forgetting that the version I have is the complete edition, and the 50-hour game length I saw was only for the base game. Add on the expansions and you get, well, this number. So yeah, I doubt this is the last I'm going to be talking about the game, at least before the review comes out, and as you'll see with the second game on the chopping block today, I'll probably sneak another long-winded game in there as well. As for the game itself, it still remained interesting because, despite the time I've dumped into it, I still feel like I'm in the discovery phase. With how they handle city and army management, there are all these little eccentricities between different settlements and the units you can get from them. I've started to notice patterns, with each one having a group that are weak as individuals but can be recruited more quickly, a big scary beastie which you can usually only get 1 or 2 of per week, some kind of ranged attacker, and so on and so forth. The heroes, however, tend to be pretty similar across the board, with much of the variance coming down to statistics tucked away within their respective character sheet. With that information, I'm starting to understand why I read somewhere that this game can be difficult to get into, because on the surface it seems fairly simple, but there's a lot of min-maxing that can be done with in-game statistics. Unfortunately for me, I've grown used to upgrades having a more noticeable effect, at least beyond stat boosts, so I'm not sure how that will affect my enjoyment. Even still though, I'm having to cordon off when I play it so that it doesn't completely consume my life. Despite being repetitive, it's got that just one more level feel, where the progression within a match is quick enough to where I want to get this next upgrade, but slow enough to where I have to be patient with it, and end up spending literal hours at a time with it. Honestly, it's a good thing I'm not in college anymore, or this game would be the death of me. Ugh. Either way, I am a little concerned as to how repetitive it may end up being, but for now, it seems to be maintaining a good enough pace and keeping things interesting enough to where it hasn't been a problem. I don't know when I'll have the game finished, and it might not be for another few months that the review is ready, but whenever I've got a bit of time on the weekend to myself, I'll know how to spend it. Here's hoping it can keep up the momentum. And to close this video off, I started playing a game that I wasn't planning on playing so soon, but my curiosity has gotten the better of me on this one. It's the sequel to a game that I've reviewed recently, but was a controversial sequel due to how different it is to its predecessor. In fact, there's been some discussion as to whether it's even a good video game as a result. Okay, you know what? Let's drop the acted black screen. Some of you might have already pieced it together from the thumbnail anyway, so I'm just gonna say that it's Chrono Cross. To give more of a backstory, when I played Chrono Trigger at the tail end of last year, I was completely caught off guard by it. Depending on whether you count Pokemon, it was the first JRPG I had ever played. And while I wouldn't say it's the best RPG I've played, it was certainly the most fun I had with an RPG that year. That meant when I heard there was a sequel, I got excited, because why wouldn't I? If it was anything like Chrono Trigger, then it wouldn't need to do much to convince me of how amazing it is. But then I found out the developers basically said, hey, you know what we should do different for the sequel? Literally everything. Go to PlayStation, where we can be more brazen with adult subject matter. Ditch the 2D sprites for early 3D graphics, completely change how the combat works, and to make sure the message is really hammered home, don't make it a direct sequel revolving around the cast we've already established, but instead around a much larger cast in a different part of the world. So, yeah, when I heard those things, suddenly my interest and concern had risen to meet each other head on, and weren't giving any ground. I wanted to see whether the changes worked, but I was also concerned due to the fact that I've already got another long-winded game on my plate, and didn't need another one that I would have no guarantee of even being good. Yet, here we are. And what pushed me over the edge was, as mentioned earlier, my curiosity getting the better of me. In the wake of playing Chrono Trigger myself, I've been subjecting my brother to it in exchange for torturing myself.
He's watching My Little Pony.
Hey, who invited you in here?
You, to make this gag happen.
And as I've said many times already, enough with the meta jokes and enough with barging in here when I'm recording something. Out!
Okie dokie dokie.
What? Brothers. Anyway, we're about to the part in the DS version where elements from Chrono Cross, well, cross over into it, so I wanted to see what the sequel was like before diving into it. And thus far, I really like it. Yeah, I know, I'm surprised too, but from what I've played, I'm really enjoying it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are points where I'm concerned about how it'll turn out. The transitions between areas in combat are a lot slower, which needlessly drag the pace. There isn't as much of a feeling of speed and efficiency when you're moving around in the world, and the 3D graphics combined with the pixelated screen definitely isn't doing it any favors. It doesn't look bad per se, but you can definitely see where the flaws are with the 3D models, and as stylized and nice as everything might seem, it's not without issue. And yet they've managed to keep what is to me the most important thing intact, and that's the story and characters. Again, harkening back to Chrono Trigger, they're fairly archetypal and predictable in and of themselves, but their personalities are so vibrant and the pacing so well done that I don't find myself caring. And speaking of that pacing, I knew a little bit as to what would happen in the first 2 hours, but even despite knowing those circumstances, I didn't expect the impact that would come with it. It's got the same sense of getting us used to something and then pulling out the sledgehammer to just shatter your expectations in one fell swoop, which means I'm really interested in seeing where it goes. Although, there are a couple of points where it seems to needlessly meander, but I don't want to say too much there yet as I don't know how it'll fit into the big picture. When it comes to combat, I'm not sure what to make of it yet. To give a quick rundown, instead of just being a copy of Chrono Trigger's combat, there are a few notable exceptions. There don't seem to be dual or triple techs anymore, or at least I don't think there are, but in their place, each character has a stamina bar that can dictate what they're allowed to do. Said stamina can be spent on 3 flavors of physical strikes, from a weaker hit that's more likely to land, to a heavy hitting one that's harder to aim, to magical attacks which in this game are called elements. Instead of being unlocked, these elements are purchased and equipped, with each character having an affinity for a certain kind of colored element. In order to use them, you have to be successful at nailing the enemy in the face with physical strikes, in order to build up energy to whatever level socket you put said element into, and once that element has been used, it can't be used again for the remainder of the fight. It's a radically different system that I have no idea how to critique yet, but is one that I'm really looking forward to exploring. It seems like in some way they were trying to get around the issue of the big guns becoming less and less spectacular or interesting when you're forced to spam them for tough fights, by artificially constraining them. It also means you have to build up to them, and neatly prevents you from stalling fights ad nauseum by just dipping into your item reserves or spamming your healing abilities. How well all of these will hold up though is a matter of time, as I haven't spent too much time with the game yet and I honestly don't know how it'll all work out by the end of it. For all I know, I could end up hating it by the end, or I could be scratching my head wondering why this didn't get the attention it maybe deserved. I mean, if you're gonna make a sequel of any sort to Chrono Trigger and you don't give people more of that, I can definitely see why people would be upset. But so far, I'm not at that stage yet, and I'm hoping that it won't come to that. Here's hoping it continues to be engaging. That's all I have for this video. Thank you all for watching. Please like and share this if you find it deserving, and subscribe to this channel for the next game in Through the Looking Glass, as well as other content posted on a weekly basis. Next week will be a review week for a game that wasn't discussed here, but to give you something to speculate over, it's a high-flying adventure from the early 2000s. As for what's coming after that, I've got a retrospective look at a recently concluded TV show the week after, assuming I can actually put the hours in to make it work, but I really like how the script turned out and we'll hopefully have that out then. Afterward, I don't have too much planned out yet. I doubt Chrono Cross will be the review after next week's video, but if you have any ideas of a shorter game that would be worth looking into, I'd be glad to hear it. I got a bunch of interesting suggestions the last time I asked about this, and I'm sure there's plenty more out there that I would likely enjoy discovering. So, with that said, thank you for any suggestions, criticism, or other such things in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.